What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Jonas, and with me, as always, is my main man, Mr. David Fuchs.
What's
He's
up?
fresh off a vacation. This is the first time that we've taped in a couple of weeks. David and
That's
I
right.
both did
We
our
were both away. We were both
yeah,
away. We were
we
both
were
away across the pond. I was in Europe. You were in Europe. I was in France. You were in Spain.
Spain, Greece. Yeah,
So
it
it's
was.
been a little bit of world travelers here.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to be back. It's nice to be back in the groove. It's nice to be talking about CFP again, to be
It's
honest. I
great.
kind of
It's
missed it
great.
a little bit.
I
It's
didn't see one advertisement over there for that. And I was like, do they even have them here? I feel like I can come here and just dominate the market.
I know, for real. In especially like in a place like London where it's English speaking,
Yeah,
you could
exactly.
dominate there.
Dominate.
The
Yeah.
only other country that I know that actually has their own CFP board is Canada.
And that doesn't even really, I mean, it counts, but it's like that's still like North America. It's
Yeah.
basically like they're part of our like CFP association pretty much. Like that's not a foreign
Mm,
board.
It's interesting because I actually had somebody who booked an assessment was like, I'm here for CFP, and they're like, and we were going through their coursework. I'm like, what what course did you take? And she's like, oh, I took it through blah blah. I'm like, what is that? And she's like, I'm like, wait a second, where do you live? And she's like, oh, I'm in Ontario. And I was like, oh, okay.
Wait, do they do the same material? Like, do they have the same
It's
exam? Or is
it's
it
it's
completely different?
different. It's not completely different, but it's different.
It's different.
Like
So you can't
it's
really like tutor someone like then.
no, because their
Like you
tax
can.
structure is completely different.
Right. That makes sense.
So so it makes it very hard to take for me to tutor it because I really don't know their tax structure and their tax
Yeah.
law.
Right.
And obviously, that hits on so many parts of
That
the
hits
exam
everything. Yep.
because you're like, well, that changes investments and that changes even
Estate.
elements of GPP, but their
Yeah.
estate thing is completely different,
Yep.
so it really kind of changes everything. So I was like, I don't know. I
No,
can't.
I can imagine that like that the biggest difference between when you go anything inter-country, when you're going outside of the US, the thing that's going to affect it is going to be tax
Yeah.
because that is going to obviously be different among, different nations, and then that is going to ultimately touch every single other piece of the exam. So that's going to be the biggest differentiator.
Yeah, and it's interesting because CFA is an internationally recognized designation where like the CFA is administered through the American organization of CFA, even if you're in London, if you're
Hmm.
in Germany, if you're in India, if you're in China, like it's the same CFA and it is only administered in English.
Yeah.
So even if you're an international student, you still have
Really,
to take it in English, which is
that's tough.
very, very impressive for somebody who is a native speaker of like Chinese or if you speak
Well, that's
Hindi
that's
and
a
then
completely different alphabet. So
right
like I
and
can't even
then
imagine how hard that
right.
is.
So can you imagine like taking the exam in a completely different language? And it's not just like colloquial English, it is business English. So that has its own set of challenges because I know a lot of people who are native English speakers that have trouble with that terminology. So
Oh
I'm
my God. Oh
so,
yeah.
like anybody who takes it in for it, I'm always like
They
double the
should get
respect.
a higher like certification mark on their CFP letter because like, no, seriously, if you're a completely different speak a completely different language and even and then like we said like Chinese, like that's not even the same alphabet. If you
True.
could do that and then pass what I would consider to be probably one of the hardest exams in the world, that's more impressive than an American English speaking student
Oh,
passing
what
that exam.
I agree with that. And like, think about like no matter how much you prep for the exam, there's always that thing going on in the back of your head on exam day that am I understanding this right? Am I reading this right? Am I understanding? I mean, you're doing that even as an English speaker. Am I
Hmm.
reading this right? Am I understanding this right? Am I reading this right? Am I understanding? And now
Yeah.
imagine that is not like I kind of think about them like if they had administered the CFP in Spanish, I'd be screwed.
Oh yeah.
Like I would be totally screwed because it was just, you got to sit there and learn a completely different language. Like and be able to express yourself in a completely different language.
Imagine your anxiety if you're getting ready to take that exam.
Oh, it's got to be through the roof. Like, and we had somebody in one of our groups that had just moved over from Hong Kong, and she probably was living in the US for 5 years and maybe even less, and passed the CFP in our July group. That I always kind of gave her extra like kudos, like it is difficult, but being in the US for that short of a period of a time, and she conducts a lot of her business still in Chinese,
China. Yeah.
but she'll work with a lot of Asian clients here in the US. But they're still speaking her native tongue, but then having to go and take the exam in a different language. I'm like,
No,
it's amazing.
that's really tough, really impressive.
Yeah.
That's really impressive.
Well, talking about test nerves, we
Yeah.
are, um, we're
But we're
getting
like three
pretty,
weeks
yeah, we're
ish.
getting pretty close to the exam at this point. Um, how do you kind of help people who are going through test nerves? Like you're around an office where people are taking tests, I would assume on a pretty regular basis. Series sevens, SIEs, things of that
I
nature.
more at my I would say my previous
Okay.
stops, because we're an RIA, so like they don't, this, you don't have to have the seven. It's not like it's
Ah,
like, oh
that's right.
you just start here, you like a lot, if you're at a brokerage firm or like an insurance company, like the first
Right.
thing you do before you can even sit at the company is you have to pass the exam. So
You don't
it's
have to
not as
take 65 for you guys for RIA.
you do, but if you have the CFP, it covers the 65.
That's right. They let
So
you. Yeah, that's right.
So like, yeah, some people do have it from being at previous firms where they needed either the 65 or the 66. Um, so they have that. But if you have the CFP, like I had the 63, not the 65, but since I had the CFP, I didn't have to take that exam as well, which I
Interesting.
was very thankful for. I had a lot of anxiety about that when I was starting my current job. I was like, shit, am I gonna have to take another FINRA exam? I'm not that I'm worried about passing a FINRA exam, but I was like, I really don't feel like having to go through that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I have a friend of mine who works. He does technical work for the market. He does technical analysis. He has a newsletter and a research firm, and he's been bugging me. He's like, "You got to go and do your CMT. You got to go and do your CMT. You got to do your CMT." And I'm like, I don't want to take another test. I understand that. Like, it's not, I'm worried about passing. It's how do I integrate it into my life
It's a
at this point?
time,
Like,
and it's a time, and it's a stress, and it's the anxiety of going through the
right.
whole thing. It's just no,
Yeah,
please.
and I spent so much of my career taking exams that I'm like, in a maybe at some point when things slow down because my number one focus is my business.
Totally.
So, and obviously we talk about that like emptying your cup, and this is exactly that example of if my cup's already full, it's very hard to take an exam because now I'm just overflowing. And that's when the stress and the anxiety really take over. But let's talk a little bit about kind
Yeah,
of test day nerves.
yeah.
If you had to break it down and you're going to give somebody one piece of test day advice, what would it be?
Um,
I know that's tough, but like let's prioritize.
I would say that the first thing that pops into my mind that's kind of like an overarching theme would be just have a plan. That, in my opinion, trumps almost everything, and is kind of, you can go different branches from that, like, all right, what should be part of your plan, what should your strategy be, what should you do if this happens, what should you do if that happens, etc., etc. But I think overall it's like if you go with a plan and like, all right, this is what time I'm going to leave, this is what I'm going to do when I sit down, this is what I'm going to do when the first question hits me that I don't know what it is, this is what I'm going to do for the case study, this is what I'm going to do at the break. I think that gives you a lot of comfort. Like I always kind of analogize it to. I mean, I'm pretty decent at talking off the cuff, but anytime I have to give a presentation and I know cold what I'm gonna say, on this specific slide or what I'm going to say about this specific idea or strategy, I feel really confident and the nerves completely go away. If
Hmm.
I go into a meeting where I'm not necessarily as prepared and I don't have as firmed up of a plan or strategy as I should, I always go in a little bit nervous. So having that plan kind of gives you that blanket of security.
Hmm. I um I have two pieces on this, and this is something that I've been seeing a little bit as of late, and it's kind of a new piece of advice that I've been giving people, which is when you feel like you're underprepared, the natural inclination is to go for the juicy answer, right? And this
Please
happens all the time,
elaborate.
right? So I'm going to elaborate. So right, let's say that I my plan was I'm going to study for CFP 3 hours a night. I'm going to do that for the next 8 weeks, and I'm going to give it my all, and I'm going to put in 300 hours. But that 300 falls short. I only got to 240, right? So I got to 80% of what my goal was. And so there's kind of this thing in the back of your head going, oh, I'm underprepared. I'm underprepared. And even if you're scoring well on your quizzes and tests, there's always this thing that you're going to go in and you're going to see the answer and you're going to go, that is the answer that I think it is. But then there's an answer that's a little bit more detailed and you're kind of go and choose that one.
Mhm.
And my number one piece of advice for you, those of you who have test anxiety, is number one, question by question. Don't look at the question number. Don't look at where you are in the exam. Obviously, kind of keep an eye on your time, but don't look at your time after every single question. Kind of pick up your head every 10 or 15 questions or so. Because if you start doing that, you're going to cause even more anxiety if you're like, oh my God, that question took 3 minutes and I'm supposed to be at 2 minutes. Oh my God, that question took 1 minute. Am I going too fast? Let the natural pace of the exam, because the natural pace of the exam is that some questions you're going to answer in 10 seconds, some questions are going to take you 3. We want the average to be somewhere around 2, but knowing that some questions are going to be quick and others. So one question at a time. Don't think about the future question, just answer the question that's in front of you and only put your attention on that one. Like, be fully in there. The second thing is go with the answer that you think it is, not the one that looks enticing.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is that you're going to look at an answer and go, that's a boring answer. Oh, but this one, they put a comma and they added a few things to it. So that's probably the answer. Even though I've never seen that before, right? I
Mhm.
still think that might be the answer. I just didn't I've never seen that before. So my recommendation is go with what you know. And if you end up getting it wrong because that's something you didn't know, that's fine. But exam day is not the day to start guessing and choosing that answer.
Yeah, to like start changing up like your habits and like changing up like what, like they say, like when you're playing golf, like the worst time to make adjustments to your swing is when you're playing on the course.
Yeah.
Like
100.
you're just gonna put yourself into a significantly deeper hole than you than you I mean I could speak for myself that you're
Right.
probably already in.
Right. Exactly. And that goes for any athletic event. Like when I used to compete in weightlifting, like my coach would actually like yell at us and be like, what are you guys doing? Like, have you ever done this when you guys lift on Monday through Friday? He's like, today's not the day to do something new. You want to do something new? Do it in training. Do it in
Yeah.
training hall, but don't do it here. This is not the time to start changing your exam strategy because then you're letting the nerves take over. So
Yeah,
whatever you
exactly.
did in rehearsals, what you do on exam day, don't start inventing new things to do on exam day.
And I think that if you're going as per your plan or your strategy or whatever you originally said, this is my game plan, it kind of gives you that confidence where, all right, if you do need to maybe be flexible and change some things up, you're better off doing it from a point of strength and confidence than you're going to be from a point of uncertainty. And what
Right.
I mean by that is like if you go in and then you forget everything that you that you plan to do. And now you're in a completely new, unfamiliar space. You're not going to be executing on anything with any confidence whatsoever.
Mm,
If you're executing with confidence, you can, in my opinion, be a little bit more flexible,
yeah.
but it's all about like what's the momentum factor at that point. So just stick to that game plan. And then if you need to call some audibles, that's fine. But at least go in with the intention of executing and
Right.
using the playbook that you made.
Yeah, and the thing is that being able to call audibles means that you've rehearsed enough where you have that right. You got to
Yeah,
earn your right to be flexible,
that's a good point. That's a
right?
great
Like
point.
you have to earn it. Like you don't just get to be like if you genuinely feel like you're underprepared, that's not the day to be flexible or to have too many audibles. Maybe one.
Yeah.
But the more you've prepared, the more mocks that you've done, the more that you can start to pivot and change
Yep.
and do those types of things. So,
Exactly. I completely agree with that, and it was a very eloquent way to say it.
oh, thank you, David. I'm a well-traveled European man.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
All right, that's a good place to stop. As always, everybody, we hope that you found this information helpful. With any questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out to David or myself, and we will see you guys on our next episode. Take care, everybody.